Good day to you all at the Provincial Fellows Conference in the Gold Coast. I'm sorry I'm not with you today. However, this talk that I'm going to give you about retirement hopefully will give you a few pointers. Why retire? Well, it's a very personal decision that each of us should make. Probably you should consider your asset base, your expenses, your family, in particular children that are still at school or even university, and you're financially assisting them. The best plan by far is to plan to retire years in advance. The transition to retirement is also a very important time from going to full-time work to full-time retired. I suggest that you reduce the part of your work that stresses you. For me, it was operating major cases. I was very happy with obstetrics and other parts of the job, but the major surgery stressed me. After you retire, in transition to retirement, you can do locums. All around Australia now we have national registration, and you can help out rural doctors in particular, particularly those ones who are solo or two-man practices, and be able to see parts of the country you might never have visited. I assisted the specialist in Albury-Wodonga, which meant that I could be assisting every day of the week. However, I chose my favourite doctors to assist. We were very fortunate to have a University of New South Wales medical school, and I got involved in the teaching of the women's health curriculum, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. And these young people were mostly country students, and we did our best to make sure they came back as country doctors. I was involved in IVF. In Albury we have an IVF unit, and some of the other things that people can get involved with is reproductive health. They're desperate for doctors, and there are many things you can do in medicine. The most important thing, I think, is to reduce your night duty, because that takes a great toll of your body. You can take up a hobby you hadn't had time before, such as golf, or go fishing or travelling, and start enjoying life. You can learn skills you've never had before, and I suggest even inquire about joining a men's shed, where you can have people who are expert teaching you how to do things you've never done. When should you retire? Well, again, that's another personal decision, but subjective judgment may be misguided, and you mightn't be the best person to judge when to retire. Ask a trusted colleague. I was very fortunate, and I had Dr. John Salmon with me, and every second week we assisted each other in private cases. And I said to John one day, if you think my operating is not up to scratch, tell me and I'll stop. Luckily I retired before he told me. Your anaesthetist will know whether you're operating to the best of your ability. Your senior registrar, senior trainee may be able to help, but it's a bit onerous for a senior trainee to tell the senior surgeon that his days are numbered. Ask your GP. If you haven't got a GP, get one, because the GP should know whether your physical and mental health is up to the job. Most important, ask your partner. Your partner will know how you're coping, and they'll also know what you'd be like in retirement. So, how to retire? Well, suddenly some people have a serious medical problem and they're forced to retire, and this is a great emotional shock to them. As I said before, it's better if you can plan retirement. If you're planning your retirement, advise your associates or partners so that they can have a succession plan, and they need to know some months or even years in advance. Notify the hospitals if you're working at, especially if you're a staff specialist. You do need really expert financial planning. You don't want to retire into poverty. You need to notify RANSCOG and your medical defence, which means that your costs go down immensely. The benefits of retiring, well, reduce stress, reduce costs, no night calls. The novelty of getting out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning wears off. It's time to enjoy life with the family, with hobbies, and when you are retired, you wonder how you had time to go to work. The downside, well, of course there's a downside. Your cash flow takes a big dive, and that's why your financial situation should be secure. For the young doctors in the audience, you should be planning now for your superannuation to keep you in retirement. I think that's the most important thing. You do have reduced ego, you have reduced status in the community, you've reduced respect because you're just retired. You have loss of professional contact, and you're more likely in your senior years when you retire, you're more likely to be a patient and not the doctor. Depression and alcohol can certainly be a problem in retirement, and that's where you need regular contact with your GP. So how did I adapt? Well, it was 10 years ago, and I started the locum scheme, was Sol's locum scheme, and did many locums around Australia where I lived at the doctor's house, looked after their dog, looked after their garden, looked after their wine cellar, and looked after their patients. So not necessarily in that order. I remained on the roster for obstetrics at Wodonga, and that was a 1 in 4 roster, and it wasn't onerous, and I really enjoyed it. I continued doing IVF, and I continued doing neonatal circumcisions because nobody else wanted to do them, and I've been doing them for 40 years. I chose the assisting that I wanted to do. Teaching students, as I said before, was a big part of my workload. Golf. Well, I was asked what I wanted to achieve in retirement, and I said I wanted my golf handicap to come down to 10. Well, sadly I failed. I only got to 10.5. What I did do is bought 100 acres of very neglected farmland, which is only 30 kilometres from Wodonga, and I've spent the last 8 years doing land care, removing blackberries, removing feral weeds, etc., and turning it into a beautiful, productive farm. I've learnt skills like fencing, landscaping, erosion control, and an awful lot of other things like building and welding that I've never done before. We downsized our house from 42 squares to a mere 22 squares dollhouse, but this is a wheelchair accessible, Energy 8 rating, completely solar house. And as you see, we have the fire on, and it's now May. We'll have the fire until October. We have groundwater. I'm lucky in that we have numerous springs that come out of the ground. This year has been a terrible drought, but 3 of the springs continued, and I've tapped one, piped it into a tank, and then store it into a very big tank, which we get all our water. I have over 160,000 litres of water for domestic use, garden use, and firefighting. I also still attend the local O&G meetings. They probably think it's the old dinosaur coming in, but it's good for my grey matter, and many of the cases I can recall having someone managed something similar in the past. So in summary, everybody will have to retire eventually. The best thing is to plan your own retirement under your own terms. This is helped by transition to retirement. Let go your ego. Spend your own hard-earned cash on yourself and your partner, and don't let it go to your Gen Y children. So I'm going to wish you all now cheers for the future. This is what you can do in retirement. You're not on call. Cheers.
Nothing's ever what we expect, but they keep asking where we're going next. All we're chasing is the sunset. Got my mind on you. Doesn't matter where we are. Doesn't matter where we are. Doesn't matter, no. If there's a moment when it's perfect, we'll carve our names as the sun goes.